Hello, and welcome to the next reading. We're in, I think this is the 10th of the series, reading my book, 11th Hour Preparedness. Once again, I'm Tyler Woods. I'm the author. And for this pandemic lockdown, I'm going to read to you my book. I'm up on page 177, where we continue, and it says beyond the first four. Remember, the first four were food, fuel, first aid, and firearms. There's more, and there are other things that also need to be addressed. Just because you did those first four, that's a good start, but you can always build upon it. There's good, better, and best, and there's always room for making things better. Page 177. The four F's: food, fuel, first aid, and firearms are only a starting place. After the basics are covered, there are other things. Sanitation. In the absence of medical help, sanitation becomes more than remembering to wash your hands before eating. Loss of refrigeration increases the possibility of foodborne pathogens. Poor waste disposal attracts flies. Improper sewage disposal can pollute your water source, and dead bodies, animal or human, will spread disease. History records that during World War II in North Africa, a superior German army with vastly superior weaponry was soundly defeated by a smaller and less well-armed British army. A little-known fact is that the British Army's greatest weapon turned out to be their Army Handbook of Field Sanitation. The British were emphatic about cleanliness, while the Germans were not. The British took great detail to define a proper latrine that could be as simple as an ammo crate with a hole cut out and a cloth flap to keep flies out. As the two sides dug in, the Germans took little care about field sanitation and literally defecated anywhere they were. Flies pestered the German soldiers and spread disease. Even Field Marshal Rommel was taken ill with dysentery spread by flies. As a result, hundreds of soldiers were taken ill, which significantly reduced the fighting ability of the German army in North Africa. When governments fail, there will be no garbage collection, so our disposal plan will have to change. Empty food containers should be evaluated for alternative use. They may not be making tin cans like they used to, so wash and save any that could be usable. The same goes for plastic containers. Containers that are discarded should be washed out or at least rinsed to reduce odors that attract flies and rodents. Start a compost pile where non-meat food scraps not fed to your animals are composted. That compost can provide a rich soil for your garden, but there is more to composting than making a pile of clippings and food scraps. Start learning how to manage a compost pile from websites devoted to this aspect of gardening. Composting requires temperature control and regular turning. If the pile is left to itself, internal oxygen levels will be exhausted and the temperature will not remain high enough to kill the pathogens, weed seed, or the eggs of parasites, cysts, and flies. Temperature monitoring and regular turning of the pile will keep temperatures high and the resulting compost safe. Another means of disposing of non-meat waste is by vermiculture. Vermiculture is composting with worms. Red worms consume large amounts of herbivorous waste and turn it into rich garden fertilizer. They are easy to maintain and can even be housed indoors. More information is available in the back of this book. For the reduced amount of actual garbage that will be created, bury it away from any well or water source. Remember that piles of garbage indicate to others that resources exist that they may want. Consider the garbage burial detail as a nightly activity for the first 3 months. Stock ample supplies of surface cleaners and disinfectants. Cleanliness needs to become a passion, and anything used to prepare, serve, or eat food should be cleaned and sterilized or sanitized right away. Leftover food, even small amounts, will attract cockroaches, flies, ants, and pests of all kinds. The easiest way to deal with the problem is to maintain an ultra clean environment. If your home appears safe and the plan is to stay put, make preparation now that can be helpful during a crisis. Get in the practice of cleaning food prep dishes, measuring cups, mixing tools, pots, and pans as food is being prepared. Clean work surfaces as you go rather than waiting until after a meal to attack a colossal mess in the kitchen. Wash all dishes and put them right away after each meal. Get out of the habit of stacking dishes in the sink and always maintain a clean kitchen. It's a good habit. Gravity-fed septic and drain fields require no electricity and will continue to work until it is full. If the tank has not been pumped in many years, it may be wise to have it pumped now. Water from washing clothes, dishes, and bathing can be saved to fill the toilet tank for flushing. Water containing laundry detergent should not be used to water the garden because of high levels of phosphates. It would be fine to use to flush the toilet. If the septic system uses pumps and needs electricity, other plans will have to be made. A well-made pit toilet outhouse is not difficult to make, but there are design requirements necessary to make them a more pleasant alternative to flush toilets. In the absence of medical help, sanitation becomes more than remembering to wash your hands before eating. How to construct a proper outhouse. On a trip to Mexico, I was told by our missionary guide that we needed to use the restroom at our motel prior to crossing into Mexico and to limit eating so that we would not need such facilities until our return. Being prior military, I was prepared for primitive plumbing and was very familiar with outhouses. Since I drank plenty of water due to the heat, I required a trip to the shack out back. Upon locating said facilities, I found a shambles of boards just waiting to fall down with a shower curtain door. These were the facilities. No problem. All I needed was a discreet place to take care of business, and I'd be on my way. When I stepped beyond the curtain, my life passed before my eyes. Or was it my nose? The smell would have caused a buzzard to puke. For a people who are limited to this kind of plumbing, how did they not know how to construct a proper outhouse? An outhouse is more than a pit, a hole, and a shack. Properly constructed, they are clean, sanitary, and do not emit strong odors. For those who may find themselves in need of constructing such a necessity, I've built and documented the finer techniques of outhouse craftsmanship. I built my shack out back on skids, so the structure can be moved to new locations as the pit becomes adequately full. You can use 2 logs, but pressure-treated 4x6s work better if they are available. My skids are about 4 feet apart, with the cross pieces about 3 feet apart. I added another floor brace halfway between the cross pieces to support the floor and seat box. Caulking is applied to every piece as it goes together. Outhouse odor is caused by lighter than air vapors that offend our nose. The trick is to trap those vapors in the box that forms the seat and vent them outside the confines of the library. The hole under the seat would normally allow those vapors to easily exit, but the next step shows another important part of good outhouse design. An airtight chute needs to be installed to deliver the offending product to the pit while blocking uninvited vapor from the library. I used an old plastic 5-gallon bucket with the bottom cut off. These have a lip at the top, so I cut the hole in the seat smaller than the lip and big enough for the bucket. With a little force, the bucket will fit tightly into the hole. And after using plenty of caulking, I attached it to the decking with 4 galvanized sheetrock screws. Any fasteners used in your outhouse should be galvanized or stainless steel due to the highly corrosive environment of outhouses. The apron fits on the front and encloses the box. A regular toilet seat fits over the 12-inch opening of the 5-gallon bucket. Now comes the most important part. Trapping the vapors does little good if they don't have a way out. I used a 2-inch PVC pipe for a chimney and sealed it to the seat box with caulk. I want to show you some pictures. I don't know if that shows real well. You can see my skid here. This is inside the library, and this is the framing for the seat box. Here is that bucket stuck down through the hole, and you can see it forms a chute. Sorry for the light densening. And here is the toilet. Whoops. Right here. It's all reversed, so it's hard to look in the video and see what I'm doing. This is the toilet seat sitting on top of the seat box. And in the back here, right there, going up the wall, is that 2-inch PVC pipe that's the chimney that takes the offending odors. What happens here is that all of the vapors rise but can't get out through the hole because of the chute, and they end up going up the chimney and out. You can use other sizes or other pipe, but what is important is to give the rising vapors a way out from the seat box. When digging the pit that the outhouse sits above, slant the bottom of the pit so that the offending material won't pile up directly under the seat. You also should seal the outhouse over the pit by shoveling dirt against the skids and cross pieces. This will prevent wind from entering the pit and finding its way up the hole under the seat. Until such time that your project needs to be functional, it can be put by the vegetable garden and used to store garden tools. It becomes a charming addition with purpose, and few will realize that it's more than a garden shed made to look like an outhouse. Internment. One of the most difficult aspects of the loss of our infrastructure will be death. Within a week, most families living in cities will be out of food, pets will suffer first, and those that cannot find food will die. Dead animals will not be picked up by animal control, and their decaying remains will breed flies and disease if not buried in a timely manner. To a lesser degree, this will affect suburban and rural areas also. It doesn't matter whose pet or livestock has died. If the body is near your home, the flies will respect no fence line. The only practical means of disposal of dead bodies is burial. Pets and livestock will not be the only bodies to deal with. There will be a lot of dead people, too. Loss of medical support, heart attack, victims of assault, and starvation will claim many. Morgues would be overwhelmed if they were open, but there will be no such facilities available. This is just one reason why remaining in an urban environment is not survivable after the loss of infrastructure. Another reality is that life may have to be taken in defense of your home and family. People driven by desperation will beg, barter, steal, and kill to stay alive. And that could be directed toward you and your family's resources. Taking a life may be the only defense. If that happens, it would be best to record the circumstances and identify the victim as best you can. Though it might be unpleasant, a digital photograph would be a good record. Should civilization return, an explanation for any grave sites on your property would be most appropriate. Clothing and washing. Our typical wardrobe today is unfit for extended outdoor physical activity and exposure to the elements. If the first rule of clothing needs to be keep covered. Never walk barefoot, even in the house. Good foot care is important. When even a minor foot injury can become a serious problem in the absence of medical attention, good boots provide ankle support and need to be a priority, along with clothes that protect from rain, wind, and sun. I'm not a fan of synthetic footwear. They may look good, and they may be inexpensive to buy, but after extended use, they fail. Runners pay $80 to $100 for a pair of road shoes that go flat after 6 to 8 weeks of daily use. The shoe may look good, but the synthetic cushion material collapses. Those who value their feet will get serious hiking boots from a reputable outfitter. Better made boots are leather and have stitched lug soles. They cost more, but good boots won't be available after things shut down. The backpacker's rule for clothing is layers. You may have to pack what you can and bug out, so what you carry had better be good. Layering allows versatility with the addition or removal of layers to compensate for heat, cold, or wet. Outer shells would be water resistant and loose fitting, or outer shells should be water resistant and loose fitting. One comment, this is 2013 writing of this book. There are some really good tactical footwear now that meets all of the needs and durability requirements, and they are made of a lot of synthetic materials. There's been a lot of growth in this area, and some of these are excellent. On top of that, they are much lighter, and so that's an area for an upgrade in this book. But we continue. In cold weather, inner layers of fleece, wool, or orlan provide good thermal protection. These materials draw moisture away from the body and do not absorb. Another backpacking rule is that cotton kills. This is because cotton absorbs moisture and holds it next to the skin. More victims of exposure are found wearing cotton clothing than any other. It's difficult to stay warm when you're wet. Down feather sleeping bags are hardly sold for use in the lowlands. Down is a great insulator when it's dry, but works about as well as wet newspaper if it isn't dry. Polar Guard, Qualifill, and Holofill 808 appear to rule the sleeping bag industry because they are very close to the insulation quality of down and will maintain that insulation even if it gets wet. Wool or synthetic socks and thermal underwear are important in cold weather. I am amazed at all the cotton thermal underwear sold in department stores. Cotton and cold weather are not a good combination. Buy synthetic, wool, or orlan thermal clothing. In hot weather, a loose-fitting, water-resistant outer shell is still needed. All clothing should fit well but remain loose and non-chafing. Wear long sleeves and long pants. The best way to stay cool is to keep the sun off the skin. Camel riding Bedouins do not wear swimming suits, at least that we can see. Over the centuries, they have learned how to stay cool in the sun. They keep covered. That sun is not a friend, and skin needs to be protected. With all the sunblock sold, it would appear that we are a nation of nudists. No sunblock made protects better than good clothing. Our family currently lives on the Gulf Coast of South Texas, and my daughter spends a lot of time cooling off in the water. We bought her a surf shirt. It has long sleeves on a high neck and an SPF rating of 45. There is nothing attractive about looking like a lobster or having skin that looks like the backside of an elephant by middle age. When shopping for protective clothing at outfitter stores such as REI, Bass Pro, or Cabela's, they will often list the SPF, sun protection factor, of their clothing. Some clothing blocks better than others. Adapting to heat will require time, especially if you're used to air conditioning. Drinking lots of water helps by providing perspiration for cooling and hydration to thin the blood. In time, you can adapt to any climate in the nation. For any weather, hats are back in. Our pioneering ancestors wore hats. They provide warmth in the cold, dry in the rain, and cool in the heat. Fashion has lost its cover with the development of small cars and air conditioning. Another rule of the outdoors is when your feet are cold, put on a hat. Nearly 30% of body heat is lost through our head. That is because so much blood goes to feed our brain. Hair is an insulator, but not a good one. In cold weather, wear a warm hat. When hot from hiking, take the hat off. Always keep a hat handy. In hot weather, wear a broad brimmed hat that protects the ears and neck as well as the face. When I arrived first in South Texas, I didn't wear a hat. A friend of mine told me, if you don't start wearing a good hat, the doctor will someday be taking your nose and ears off one visit at a time. In our church, we have had many members who spent long hours in the sun and are now paying for it with skin cancers. Some have come to church looking like a partially peeled potato after visiting their doctor for an annual checkup. Sunglasses, hat, and full cover are not just for sunny days either. The deception of cloud cover is that it blocks the sun. Clouds do block some of the sun, but not the UV rays that cause sunburn and skin cancer. I've been sunburned worse on overcast days than clear days because I wasn't thinking about protective cover. Protective clothing. Protective clothing is important. Cuts, scrapes, and injuries should be avoided. Before performing tasks, think twice and wear protective clothing always. A scrape to a leather glove can't get infected, but a scrape to a hand can. Protective eyewear has stopped the need for more ER visits than any other item. Have them handy and use them. Protective non-clothing. I've covered this in other areas, but it's worth repeating. Store lots of heavy black plastic for quick construction of everything, from blackout curtains to shower enclosures. This stuff is the duct tape of construction material. Duct tape by the case, nails of all sizes, various sizes of sheetrock screws, wire, rope, string, and glue for repairing, creating, and concealing. All of these will become vital assets when you find yourself on your own. Don't forget, yards and yards of mosquito netting. When the county stops spraying for them, mosquitoes will become a health concern. Personal and residential bug repellent would be greatly appreciated, but know how to properly use it and keep it away from sources of drinking water. Laundry. Keeping your clothing clean without electricity is a challenge. There's always the rock by the stream, if either are available, but it won't take long to wish for a better answer. Washboards are better decoration than a laundry tool, and I'm sure they contributed to making laundries one of the most popular businesses in pioneering America. The Army Corps of Engineers designed wind-powered washing machines at Iwo Jima. They were not much more than a 24-inch fan driving a shaft that worked an agitator. A simple plan for making one can be seen at, and it's Mother Earth News. You have to look it up. I'm not sure it's still there, but you can search for cheap washing machines or wind-powered washing machines, and I'm sure it's out there somewhere. All that is needed to wash clothes is a container to hold the wash, detergent, and a means of agitating the clothes so the dirt can work its way out. A plastic tub and toilet plunger will work. It only takes about 200 plunges to wash a load, and you don't have to work fast. Gentle agitation will do the job. Most effective laundry detergents contain high amounts of phosphates and should not be used to water the garden. Dispose of it away from garden areas. Ladies, aprons may be back in style when washing returns to manual labor. Making an apron is easier than making the clothing it protects, and they are easier to wash as well. Pioneer women bought simple dresses in dark colors and used various aprons to change the appearance. They could make a dress last for several days between washings because they kept it clean with aprons and full underclothing. Since the invention of the electric and gas clothes dryer, the wash line has all been but forgotten. It will regain its place in the family when the electricity quits. Clothesline is still sold at the hardware store, but it isn't available after stores close. Clothespins will be in short supply and will become a prized item for barter as will canning lids and rings. A word of caution: clean clothes on a line is an advertisement of resources. It would be wise to dry your clothes out of sight, perhaps inside, during social turmoil. I might add, after Hurricane Harvey, I was in a hardware store because I could drive out of the area, and went down to a Home Depot in Corpus Christi. And I found everything I needed, but I couldn't find clothespins. And I asked one of the store clerks there, young man, and I asked him, where are clothespins? And he says, what are clothespins for? He didn't know what a clothespin was. And I said, oh, they're a handy invention. And I said it with enough loud voice that people around me could hear. I said, they're a handy invention that keeps your underwear in your own yard. And everybody else got a laugh. He still was clueless. I told him they hold your wet clothes to a clothesline. And from that, he kind of guessed what section they might be, and we ended up finding them. But yeah, clothespins are real important. And it would be a good thing to stock up a large supply of them. And we've got some, but they were packed away somewhere, and I would have to go digging. So it was easier for me at the time to just go buy some more. Bathing. While vacationing in South Carolina, our family was introduced to the outside shower. It had a dressing area and was completely private, though outside. With a little ingenuity, an outside shower can be fashioned that uses an elevated water barrel on the roof, maybe, and some hose to reach the shower. Very little water pressure is needed, and a hose left in the sun provides hot water all by itself. Keeping clean helps to avoid illness, so why not make it enjoyable? Anyone can take a bath out of a bucket. Food preparation. Keep it clean. The kitchen and food preparation utensils need to be very clean. Botulism grows easily and quickly in the absence of refrigeration. Washing down all surfaces with a bleach solution should become a regular practice. Be sure to let the solution stay in contact with the work surfaces before it's dried off. Bleach needs time to work. Do not attempt to store liquid laundry bleach, as it loses its potency rather quickly. Swimming pool super shock usually contains calcium hypochlorite, and this is little more than powdered bleach. Calcium hypochlorite becomes sodium hypochlorite when it mixes with water. It has between 65 to 70% available chlorine and will make the equivalent of laundry bleach when a tablespoon of super shock is dissolved into 6 cups of water. When kept dry, it has an effective shelf life of more than 10 years, and 1 pack of super shock will make many gallons of liquid bleach. Make sure to purchase super shock that does not contain copper or other algicide. Camp cooking. Okay. Camp cooking presents some unique challenges without a stove or oven. Our pioneer ancestors were proficient at cooking meals over an open fire with cast iron. Cast iron cookware is still available and makes up most of what our family uses for stovetop cooking. For outdoor baking, there's a wonderful tool called a Dutch oven. Camping versions of this pride of wagon train cookery are available through Lodge Manufacturing. A camp version has a tight-fitting flat lid that will hold hot coals on top, while short feet on the bottom keep the oven from compressing the coals underneath. There are organizations and internet sites dedicated to the art of Dutch oven cookery, and they offer recipes and instruction. It would be good to learn the art while you can still call out for pizza if the first attempts don't turn out well. Outdoor bread oven. A more conventional oven can be made from stone, brick, or adobe. These were the bread ovens used from ancient times and continue today. Our family followed an interpretive trail that traced the work camps of men who carved Highway 2 through the North Cascade Mountains of Washington State. I was amazed at the piles of rock that served as camp bread ovens. They were very simple but did the trick. And they were literally piles of rocks, just stacked up and made an oven. They could start a fire in there block the hole, collect that heat in the rocks, and then when it was sufficiently hot, they could sweep out the coals, put in the loaf of bread, and cover it up again. It baked bread. Here's a picture of an adobe outdoor bread oven with a fire inside, heating it all up. And the metal is to keep the rain from washing it away. A more conventional oven can be made from stone brick or adobe. These were the bread ovens. Okay, excuse me, I'm backing up. They were very simple but did the trick. The bread oven pictured is called an Orno and is the project of Jeff Ross. It's made of adobe and is one of the best I've seen. The principle of these basic ovens is to saturate the stone, brick, or adobe with heat from a fire built inside the baking area. Once the oven is heated throughout, the coals are shoveled away and the bread is placed inside. Heat will soak out of the masonry and maintain sufficient temperature to bake bread and other food for several hours. Rocket stoves. These can be purchased or made. They are very efficient, burn twigs, branches, pine cones, or material that otherwise would be thrown away. Burning is almost smoke-free after only a minute or two of operation. You can learn more about these amazing stoves from an internet search of rocket stove. The best aspect of a rocket stove is the abundance of available fuel. An apple box of sticks can fuel a stove to cook a week's worth of food for a family. The food preparation area. Beyond what you plan to cook on is the area of how you will prepare the foods. We are spoiled with electric appliances of all kinds and usually ignorant of how Grandma prepared food for her family. A great exercise is to prepare a complete meal using only manual appliances. You'll find mashed potatoes are lumpy until you find an adequate potato ricer. Try making whipped cream or meringue without an electric mixer. Avoid customizing your dinner to avoid the need for electric assistance, and seek ways to accomplish the same tasks without them. I found a great manual food chopper and even a small manual food processor through Pampered Chef. Amazon sells manual food processors and even a hand crank powered blender. There are few chores in the kitchen that require electric power. Make sure you have several good manual can openers. I have a swing away crank style can opener that mounts to the wall and find it as handy as the electric can opener that is mounted under the cabinet. I like the rule for preparedness that says 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Always have a backup. My son and I, by the way, this is the section on fire. My son and I made an overnight hike to a lake in the Cascade Mountains. We had packed a single burner camp stove and plenty of food. The weather forecast was for a chance of showers, but we packed all our clothes in waterproof bags just the same. The trail was listed as well maintained. We must have been lucky that day because it chanced all over us all the way to the lake. The well-maintained trail turned out to be a dry creek bed that was about 4 to 6 inches short of dry. By the time we got to the lake, we were drenched, and it was getting dark. Our tent went up quickly, and we tucked in for the night after a good dinner of beef jerky and Gorilla cookies. Gorilla cookies are chocolate-covered high-energy bars. Morning found us well but hungry. The rain lasted all night but was light by breakfast. Breakfast? It sounded so good, and we could hardly wait to crank up the stove. To our dismay, the seal at the pump that pressurized the fuel tank had failed, and we couldn't get the stove to burn. No problem. We gathered a pile of small sticks and dumped the white gas on them to start the fire. What a glorious fire we had! For about a minute, that is. Then it died out, leaving us with a pile of steaming sticks and no more fuel. The next few hours proved to be a lesson we will never forget. Scrounging around that soaked forest for anything dry enough to burn was a challenge. I ended up splitting wrist wood, sticks about the diameter of your wrist, and carving out the dry wood slivers at the core. It wasn't easy to find dry wood because some was too green and others had begun to decompose and was damp. Once I had found enough wood that was dry inside, I had to carve out enough to build a fire hot enough to dry other sticks sufficiently to burn. It must have taken 2 hours to get a small fire burning, but by then my son's lips were beginning to turn blue. Our little fire was enough to heat about a pint of water in a canteen cup. We had fortified hot chocolate and oatmeal, but we're down to our last matches and using toilet paper for kindling. The point of this is that fire making is necessary to keeping warm, dry, and to cook food. If fire can't be made, it could cost a life. My son was inspired for his next 4-H project with a presentation that he titled, "A Spark Could Save Your Life." He got a blue ribbon for that speech. Making fire doesn't have to be difficult if some preparations are made. We never go into the woods anymore without at least several backup plans for making fire. Here are just a few of the easier ways to get some heat out of dry wood. Oh, that's the first thing. Get some dry wood. Making fire requires tinder. Tinder can be dry grass or shredded cedar bark or wood shavings. Most good tinder can be fashioned into something like a bird's nest. Pre-build your fire with dry tinder covered loosely with small sticks and then larger sticks. Have a stack of dry wood available to feed your fire. You won't have time to go looking once the fire starts. Fire starts with a spark. Sparks are tiny fires that can be built into bigger fires. Several different means are available to get a spark. A good one is called a match. Friction of the match on the striker causes the fuel at the tip of the match to ignite and burn the stick or cardboard as fuel. Simple. Fine steel wool and a 9-volt battery will start a fire, but there are many better uses for a 9-volt battery than to drain it by starting fires. Forget everything you know about using 9-volt battery and steel wool to make a fire, except that it's a poor use of resources. Char cloth. Good tinder can be made ahead of time from squares of canvas or old cotton blue jeans and a steel can with a tight-fitting metal lid. Punch some nail holes in the can with the patches of canvas inside and put the can into the coals of a hot fire. As the patches of cloth begin to char, they will emit fumes that cannot burn for the lack of enough oxygen inside the can. Those fumes will flame as they exit the nail holes. As soon as the flames stop around the nail holes, your char cloth is done. Fish out the can from the fire and let it cool. After it cools, open the can and retrieve the blackened cloth. Char cloth keeps its shape, but is fragile and easily broken, so handle it gently. Char cloth will ignite and glow with a very small spark. Flint and steel, more properly called fire rod, is a material that when struck or scraped by a steel edge will create sparks. They can be purchased in many camping departments from Walmart to Cabela's. Sparks are directed into a tinder until it begins to glow. As you blow on the coal and fold it into the bird's nest, heat builds and creates smoke that will ignite into fire. I've started a fire by flint and steel using dry grass as tinder, but char cloth works much faster. A magnifying glass works when a fire is needed and the sun is shining, but it's not reliable since a fire may be needed after dark. A bow and spindle refers to a technique that can be effective and reliable. The best part is that nothing is required from the store. Select a resilient branch and cut it so that a 30-inch cord could be tied between both ends. This is the bow. The spindle is a straight piece of dry branch about the thickness of your thumb and about the length of your hand from the longest finger to the beginning of the wrist. Round the ends so that one end is blunt and the other end somewhat pointed. Wood selection is important to successful fire making. With this method, and the wood must be very dry. It would be good to master this method before depending on it. There are 2 more pieces in this device. A bobbin is a piece of wood that fits in the palm of your hand and has a small round depression that will hold the more pointy end of the spindle. The bobbin keeps the spindle from wearing a hole in your hand. The last item is a baseboard. The baseboard is about the same thickness as the spindle. Measure in from the edge of the baseboard about the thickness of the spindle and carve out a depression half the diameter of the spindle so that the spindle can spin in it and be contained. Now wrap the string of the cord of the bow once around the middle of the spindle and trap the spindle between the bobbin in your hand and the depression in the baseboard. Pressing down with the bobbin and drawing the bow back and forth, spin the spindle to burn out a hole in the board. A blackened hole should be visible with the edge about half the diameter of the spindle from the edge of the baseboard. Now cut a V-shaped notch from the edge of the board to just inside the edge of the burn hole. The notch should be wider on the bottom of the baseboard and narrower on the top. This notch is to catch burning embers from the friction of the spindle and the baseboard. Now place the notch hole over a flat piece of bark or a thin piece of wood to catch the embers that will be made. Resume spinning the spindle in the hole while applying downward pressure with your free hand. Smoke should be evident. Embers will begin collecting on the notch under the baseboard. Carefully lift the baseboard and gently blow on the embers. When it glows from gentle blowing, move it to the bird nest of tinder and follow the process as with any other source of spark. Become proficient at several methods of fire making by practicing them regularly. There's no substitute for experience. And we will stop there until tomorrow. But I will also tell you, I don't practice starting a fire with a bow and spindle. Even under the very best of circumstances, Boy Scouts earn that merit badge in June or July or August at their summer jamboree camps. It's very rare to see anyone successful at starting a fire with a bow and spindle when it's a rain-soaked forest or cold. This is just something that's just, there are very practical means, and then there are ways that can be done. And my absolute go-to method of starting a fire begins with a Bic lighter. And after that, I use the flint and steel in char cloth. And I have started a fire with char cloth in as little as 60 seconds. And that's pretty good. And that works for me every time. I've taught others how to start fires with char cloth. And I have seen an entire class of people learning preparedness skills. And I have seen the joy on their face when they take a Harbor Freight cheap ferro rod and a piece of char cloth and get a fire started flames in less than 60 seconds. That's a reliable, good process. The biggest challenge to fire making is finding dry tinder when you need the fire. If you're going to practice these skills, it's one thing to be able to do them in the summertime when the sun is shining. It's another thing to go out into a rain-soaked forest and find dry wood and build a fire. I would suggest practicing that as often as you can. That's where the rubber meets the road and where starting a fire effectively can save a life. Anyway, bless you today. I will see you again tomorrow.